everybody. Welcome to the start of chili season as the weather changes into winter and we all bundle up in front of the fire with warm beverages in hand for heartwarming tales of history. But who are we kidding? Keep the cozy fire and the warm beverage. Grab any fur babies and force them to join you in the warm snuggles. And join us for a couple deep, dark tales of the creepy, weird side of history.
Heartwarming. Yeah, I'm sure this is going to be so heartwarming. I actually do know who this one's about this time, guys.
Yeah, Kat actually knows who this one's about, but she doesn't know what I'm about to tell her, really.
I know the Cliff Notes synopsis, but I don't know any of the details.
Yeah. But first, Kat, let's gush over the dice at Greenleaf Geek.
Yes!
Because there's actually a set of dice that are perfect for today's episode called Blood Oath.
Oh my god, of course there are.
They were actually made, I believe, for another podcast called Willing and Fable that Leah worked with, where they created multiple dice for a D&D storyline that they did, mixed in with like the tales of mythology and other history from around the world. And honestly, these are gorgeous dice, and I know that they're included for sure in our 10% off when you go to her website using our special link, www.greenleafgeek.com/WDYKA podcast. Like, I'm super tempted to make an order soon with these dice in there because they're just gorgeous and they actually look bloody inside.
So my dice collection is huge and it really takes a lot to justify buying some more, but these are some cool looking dice. Like the ones in the Greenleaf Geek shop are they're so good. Also, I don't know if we've actually plugged this yet, but they have an Instagram. You can see all this for yourself on their Instagram as well.
Yeah, I have done some posts with and stuff taking their Instagram, so you definitely check out on our Instagram to go get to their Instagram and take a look at her dice. Sometimes she does like Kickstarters, so you can get in on like the ground floor with some of her new dice, so keep an eye out for those as well. But yeah, like definitely go check them out and check out the Blood Oath dice that will go well with this particular piece of history, because I mean, yeah. When you can find dice that go well with the history you're telling, like everything is just gorgeous.
Absolutely.
And so is the person that we're talking about today. Like, actually, a very gorgeous woman. Possibly not so gorgeous of things that she did, but very gorgeous woman.
Like, aesthetically pleasing.
But first, as usual, major fair dues warning. We'll be talking about accusations of murder, gruesome torture methods, and a fair amount of details about blood. As we've already talked about, because I've already talked about blood. Alright. So I'm excited to get into this because Countess Elizabeth Bathory is absolutely one of my favorite historical figures. Like, when I'm asked who I'd have for dinner, dead or alive, she is easily on that list.
I mean, listen, I'd have a lot of questions for her, but I will reserve. I was going to say I would probably be a little bit scared to actually be near her, but I will actually reserve that comment for the end of this because I actually don't know exactly what or why she did it.
Yeah.
Well, why she did what she did.
I mean, like, so many people think that they have her pegged, right? Blood Countess, the world's most prolific female serial killer. But what if she's actually in the same camp as my other top historical figure, Miss Lizzie Borden? What if there's actually major questions surrounding the truth behind all the accusations of the crimes that have been put to her name? But let's start with a quick refresher about her current identity as we know it, in case any of our lovely listeners have not heard these stories before. So, Elizabeth Bathory was born to a noble family in Hungary on the 7th of August, 1560. And when I say noble, I mean like freaking noble.
So like her high nobility.
Like high. Like her family basically ruled Transylvania. Which was not actually so Transylvania was not actually part of Hungary at this time. It was its own little thing.
Okay.
But basically, like, it was, like, for what we consider now, it's all part of Hungary. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But she was a very sick child, suffering from seizures constantly. We would now know her condition to be called epilepsy, but back then it was called the falling sickness.
Yeah. Back before they knew what it was.
Yeah, exactly. Like, nobody knew what it was, and known remedies included rubbing quote-unquote healthy blood on the lips of the person suffering seizures or giving them a tonic of said healthy blood mixed with crushed skull bone.
They had so many theories about the blood of young people, like keeping you from aging and stuff like that. Like, where did they really, like,
And it wasn't even like young blood, but like just quote unquote healthy blood. So the person, so it didn't have to be young. It just had to be that person was healthy.
Sorry, I'm being visited by a kitten, speaking of young. Yeah, like healthy blood.
Yeah.
Like,
so they didn't have to be young. It just had to be that somebody had to be healthy, right?
Okay.
And this is kind of where people might have even thought of her having like the vampiric tendencies that they've given her. Because this might be that she was doing some of these things for her, because this was her remedy for her seizures, right? This might be where like some of those vampiric ideas came from with her tortures and stuff like that, right?
Like it didn't come out of nowhere.
Exactly.
Like they got the idea from somewhere.
Yeah. So by the age of 13, as we said in the last episode, this is a different time period. By the age of 13, Elizabeth was engaged to her future husband, Count Frederick Nasadi.
Okay.
The match was purely political, of course. And when they married 2 years later, the family officially owned a whole lot of land between both Transylvania and the Kingdom of Hungary.
Oof.
Which, as I said, were separate at the time.
Right.
So, like, they owned a shit ton of property between two kingdoms, basically.
Yeah. Right, okay.
Elizabeth's wedding gift from Nasadi was one of his many castles. And I'm going to probably butcher this. Kashtik Castle.
Imagine just being gifted a castle.
Well, let's just make this clear. I recently just got married. I wrote the script before getting married. I sure as hell did not get a castle as my wedding gift from my husband.
Like, it's just like some Anna of Cleves shit where you're just like, okay, I just have a castle now. Like, no big. Like, what?
Like, I would have loved a castle, thank you, but no, that wasn't happening.
Girl, I'm like, imagine getting gifted a house, let alone a castle.
Right? I would have preferred a castle than a house, but, like, you know, a house would have been nice, too. In this economy, a house would have been great.
In this economy, I'll take a house.
I'll take an apartment that I actually own and not rented.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'd take a condo in my own name. Like,
I'd just take anything that I could own, property-wise. Whatever it is. As long as I owned it and didn't have to pay rent.
Well, however wealthy we aspire to be, Bathory was richer. Like,
much richer. So, Elizabeth and Frederick did not live at the castle that he gifted her after the wedding. She wouldn't actually live at that particular castle until a little bit later in her life, but it is Katish Castle in which all of her crimes are said to have taken place in.
Right, okay.
And it is actually a tourist destination that you can go and visit the ruins of the castle. So, add that to a bucket list of places to go. It is gorgeous when you look at pictures of it. So, 3 years into their marriage, Ferenc became the chief commander of the Hungarian troops and was off to war, leaving Elizabeth completely in charge of the family business affairs and all of the many estates under their names.
You know what? That doesn't sound so bad.
No.
Like, that's a lot of work. Don't get me wrong. A lot of work, a lot of responsibility, lots of pressure.
But she had the power.
But, like, could be worse.
Like, she was the one who could just run everything.
Yeah.
Where he was like, hey, look, I trust you. You got a good head on you. You're in charge. Everybody has to bow down to you. She's like, okay.
And she's like, how old at this point now?
So they were 15 when they got married, so 18-ish?
Okay, 18-ish.
18 to 19,
18-ish is okay. 18-ish is okay to run an estate. That's not like...
Well, no, not just one estate, like many estates.
Multiple estates.
Multiple estates, multiple businesses.
That's not bad. I'm sure she had like a team of advisors and stuff like that too,
oh, probably.
So. Okay.
Probably.
So it's not like she's completely out on her own here.
Oh, God, no. But this also meant that she was also in charge of defending their estates, which were right in the path of the war that was raging around the Hungarian Empire.
Yeah, that is a bit more of a problem.
Yeah, so she was also, also in charge of the army, basically, that was going to defend their homes.
Yeah.
While she was doing this, she actually intervened many times on behalf of women who were at risk of being kidnapped and raped by the soldiers.
Wow.
That she just was
Okay.
like
That.
swooping in and being like, yeah, no, not happening.
Yeah. She's like, I'm not gonna let this fly.
Like,
Don't
you guys
even.
just come on into our states, come get some some coverage. Like, this ain't happening to you. Congratulations, you're safe.
Yeah.
I got your
Yeah.
back.
Making a little safe haven for them.
Yeah. So,
That's really
like,
good, actually.
honestly, do you see that as somebody who's going to torture and murder a pile of women?
No. No, I feel like they're safe.
Like, these ones are fairly safe, unless she was doing this to torture and rape them or and murder them. But like, I don't see
Or
it.
it's like you where it'd be like a false sense of security kind of thing.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't see it because then they're coming back and being like, "Hey, look, this woman helped us."
Yeah,
They
exactly.
weren't coming back and being like, "Hey, this woman brought us in to save us from these soldiers, but then
And
took us out." Like,
yeah, they would have ratted her out for
like
sure, for
she would
sure.
have already had a sense of fear from people,
Mm.
right? So at this time, Elizabeth and Ferenc had 5 known children, with a 6th possible child who is not confirmed in all sources. Some sources say that this child existed, some sources do not, and some of the sources that say there's a 6th child don't even agree as to the gender or the name of the 6th child or how the
Oof.
6th child died.
Wow.
So who knows about the 6th child? The
Yeah, so
power
that's like your big mystery.
yeah,
Hmm.
the 6th child is just like, okay, could not be, who knows, because like it's completely like myth basically, with
Yeah,
variety of possibilities for them.
not enough records.
Yeah, and not enough like no like records that line up.
Yeah, that makes
So
sense.
the power couple were married for 29 years before Ferenc
Nice.
passed away in 1604 to an unknown illness,
Ooh, okay.
leaving.
Poison?
No, it was just like that they don't know what type of illness it
Okay.
was. It was not poison. It was not like a. It wasn't like a he could have been murdered kind of unknown illness. It was just a he died of natural causes, but we don't know what the natural cause was.
Okay. Fair enough. I'll accept.
Leaving his children and widow under the official care of a friend, Gregory Thurzo. But in all, Elizabeth had absolute full control over the entire family, businesses, and all the estates.
Okay.
So, with that bit of background out of the way, to the crimes! So, Elizabeth now had castles and estates completely to herself. She had servants galore and literally all the power. But even before her husband's death, rumors were spreading through the kingdom of Hungary. Ferenc was off at war, and Elizabeth's power was already cemented in her household. Tales of blood streaming down the corridors and screams echoing through the stone halls spread like wildfire.
Oof.
Servants were being replaced constantly, their predecessors never being seen again. It is said that Elizabeth Bathory would cackle in glee as she punished the young girls for the slightest sewing mishap by sticking needles deep down into their nail beds, that she'd bleed them dry for
Whoa.
the pure pleasure of it, and then bathe in their crimson blood in order to stay young forever.
Holy shit, that escalated quickly.
Yeah.
We went from this girl is like getting married young and is like now suddenly in charge of multiple estates, has kids, etc., to all of a sudden like that's like some really brutal torture.
Yeah. So
So like we're
some people say like some like people like historians and stuff say that her parents and her family started it, that she had
yeah.
seen different pieces of torture, because in Transylvania and stuff there'd be like people who would be sewn into dead animals as like punishment and left there
Whoa.
alive to die basically inside of a dead animal.
Particularly awful.
That as and that like her family would use torture and things like that, and that Ferenc also was a very like cruel person and things like that, that she learned it from other people in her family and
Gotcha.
from him, but there's no actual like full evidence towards
Evidence.
that
Okay.
kind of a thing. But like that's kind of like that's just like the rumors, is that that's what was happening inside of her castle, right?
Gotcha. Okay.
So first things first, I'm going to quash everyone's dreams about the whole bathing in blood thing.
She didn't actually do that?
Well, it is actually pretty much impossible for her to do that.
Okay.
In order to get a full tub, she would need like 12 to 20 girls per bath, at least.
Okay, yeah, there's no way that she could slide that under the rug. That's a massacre.
And it would take hours to draw said bath.
Oh my god. Yeah, no kidding.
If she's anything like they make her out to be, I honestly don't think she'd even have the patience for it anyways.
Honestly valid.
Plus, with the time frame it would take, the blood wouldn't be in a bathing consistency. Blood starts to congeal fairly quickly once it is out in fresh air, so it wouldn't be the most comfortable bath.
Yeah, that would be all kinds of ick, even if she could somehow pull that off. Yeah. Okay.
Also, the whole story of her bathing in their blood came about 100 years after her death. So there's literally no historical value to that part of the tale, so that can just be removed from your memories.
Anytime that it's like, actually, this rumor only came about however long after they die, I'm always like, yeah, okay, so it wasn't a thing then.
Yeah. Secondly, let's take a quick look at the numbers.
Yeah.
At the time of her arrest for the accusations in 1612, she was accused of murdering anywhere from 30 to 60 young women. The top number that she is accused of is up to 650 young women, according to one apparent witness who says that she had a private book with that number listed. The book was never found during investigations.
So that just came out of nowhere then.
Yeah. That number of people would be like multiple people per day being murdered. That would be, and this is and like around her town, like around like this, like it's not a very big town around this castle. That's a lot of people going missing pretty much per day.
For no one to notice.
Over years.
Over how many years?
Over multiple years, because this is apparently starting when her husband was already in war. He died in 1604, and she's not arrested until 1612.
Okay, so he goes to war, she stays behind, she takes care of things, she defends her palace, she turns her home into the sanctuary for all these young women that, like, would have been victimized otherwise, or had already been victimized. And then people are saying that while she's doing all this,
she started doing it. Yeah, she started doing the torture and everything.
That's when she started, like, torturing and murdering that many people. Like, when would she have the time?
Pretty much. That's also my question, is when the heck do you have the time to do all of this?
Right, like, that takes a lot of work.
But, like 1604 is when her husband dies. 1612 is when she's arrested. So that's, like, at least, like, 8 years. To get up to, like, 650, like, even to get up to 60 people, that's a lot of people in, like, 8 years.
Like, I don't know, man. That takes a lot of time to do all that. Yeah, that's, great, man. The stories people come up with.
Yeah. But, so, here's the thing about this case. Okay? So, my darling friend Elizabeth was living in a time where all of her estate sat on extremely valuable lands that held a shit ton of power for whomever held them. And, like, I mean a shit ton of power. There was also the wars going on over land, and Transylvania/Hungary were in a bit of a tight spot when it came to relations. So there was a Transylvanian woman currently sitting with a shit ton of power right on the border of the two. And a woman, of all things.
Yeah.
Now, if Elizabeth was just some random widow, easy peasy lemon squeezy.
Yeah.
But she was a Bathory.
Yeah.
So the family name itself makes it a lot harder to just simply remove the titles, remove the land from her.
Yeah, so they had to come up with this egregious story, make it out like she's this prolific serial killer who's, like, torturing innocent women.
Yeah. So this whole theory that I'm bringing up, it's not new by any means. It's been tossed about academically for years by historians. It just hasn't really caught a lot of traction in the mainstream. Really, who wants to discredit the idea of a blood-bathing murderous woman that we've all been sexualizing basically since she was arrested all those years ago? Just looking up Elizabeth Bathory images gets a ton of fan art, which is almost overrides like the real historical paintings of her beautiful features. There are countless pieces of literature and music all based off of these insane accusations of her reign of terror. So my number one source that I'm actually using for today, because there's so many academic papers to sift through, is No Blood in the Water by Rachel Lee Bradshaw from the University of Illinois. She looks at Elizabeth's story from the lens of legal and gender conspiracies, which is what the majority of historical academics seems to agree would be the correct lens to judge the story through. Yet, this reign of terror is quite literally based off of village gossip. Or as I'm going to call it, village hearsay. For all my fellow Depth v. Hurt Witch trial watchers, you'll know what I'm talking about.
Are there any law nerds in the audience? We want to know. Comment on Instagram if you're a law nerd.
If you're a law nerd, you'll know all about hearsay, and this is literally what this case is.
Objection hearsay.
Everyone who made any sort of accusation against Elizabeth had zero proof or first-hand knowledge about anything happening inside the castle. They had just conveniently heard it from someone else.
Of course.
Some had heard from people who were inside the castle. Others had even heard it completely secondhand themselves. Today, this would not make a credible legal case.
I don't think it should have then either, to be honest.
But as we all know, with the various witch and werewolf trials throughout the world at this time, hearsay is all one needs. And this is where Thurzo comes back into the picture. You remember him, right? The guy that Elizabeth's husband was great friends with and then put his wife and children under the care of?
Oh, no.
Yep.
Okay.
He is now here to, quote-unquote, investigate the accusations of torture that is happening to the servants under Elizabeth's care. But even worse, it is speculated that he might have helped to plant some of these rumors around the village under Elizabeth's castle.
That's literally exactly what I expected you to say. Like, I don't know.
So,
good grief.
Thurzo himself had a lot on the line with Elizabeth's case. He was, of course, power hungry.
You don't say.
All men really were at this time, though. And kind of still are. Thurzo was on his way to becoming extremely powerful both politically and religiously in Hungary during the 1600s. In fact, he became the Palatine of Hungary in 1609, aka the year that Elizabeth would be arrested for her crimes along with a few of her servants who were said to be accomplices. This title of his was considered to be the highest rank any man could find in Hungarian office, save for the literal title of king.
Wow, that's pretty that's wow.
Yeah. So Elizabeth wasn't arrested until late December, so I believe that Thurzo might have used his personal connection as his key to the gate into this position. Where basically he was like, hey, I have a connection to her, so give me this position and then I will go get her arrested.
Yeah, makes sense.
Like, I'll take care of this problem for you if you do this for me.
Yeah. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours kind of deal.
He stayed extremely loyal to the Habsburg Empire until he died in 1616, which honestly says a lot about his loyalty. Wasn't to his friend.
Oh.
All he cared about was his king and his religion, to which he was a devout Lutheran. In 1610, Thurzo actually put forth the decree, and I may butcher this Latin, so please excuse me, Cuius regio ius religio, which it may sound like some sort of spell straight out of Hogwarts, but in English it means whose realm their religion. This decree meant that whomever ruled the kingdom got to decide what religion was practiced.
Interesting, okay.
Like, he was that powerful.
Wow.
And this wasn't even put just into practice in Hungary, but throughout the entirety of Western civilization. So like Germany, Russia, Prussia, Poland. Thurzo had his hand basically everywhere at this point.
That's, yeah. That's kind of unmatched.
Yeah. But for right now, he was a little bit focused on ruining the life of one specific woman. Because she held a lot of land on very, very important borders. So once rumors started to fly, panic starts to spread. There's a crazy woman in a castle murdering and torturing young women. Whatever shall we do about it?
Like, yeah.
Yeah. So over 300 people started to talk when Thurzo, under the king's orders, started to ask around.
And just started, like, adding to the story, even though...
Yeah.
Okay, but, like, when you are adding to a story like that, like, you gotta know you're making shit up. Like...
Well, here's the thing, though. So some of these stories, however, could actually be true.
Okay. But, like, not, like, her, like, bathing in blood.
No, that one we can already tell was not true, because that was told over 100 years later. But some of the stories could actually be true.
So we're talking stories about, like, her potentially, like, drinking blood or, like the torturing people? Did she, like, actually? So
Elizabeth and her accomplice servants, they could have actually been sticking needles under, like, the young woman's nails.
She's so uncomfortable.
They could have been using hot tools to burn their servants' feet or hands, etc.
Yeah.
Like, a variety of these quote-unquote tortures are actually highly likely.
Oh, okay. Quote-unquote tortures. Those are, like, tortures. We could say alleged, maybe, but those are definitely tortures. Like,
they just most likely were not done to be torture, but done as in-home medical procedures.
I'm sorry. How are those things... How could they possibly be medical?
Transylvania and Hungary were two very different countries at the time with very different methods. Yes. Transylvania had a more rustic way of doing things, especially when it came to medicine. So, for example, sewers at this time were likely to get these blisters under their fingernails that were commonly relieved in Transylvania by bursting them with a needle. That was the only way to actually get to these painful blisters, that you would just take a needle, and then that was actually the only way to actually relieve that pain. So to anyone in the more modern Hungary, this would seem barbaric and like a form of torture if they were not given any sort of form of context,
any kind of context
as to why this was being done to these girls.
This is why context is everything, people.
Yeah. So like the hot tools to burn their feet and stuff like that might have been for like sores or warts or something, right? Like that, because like as we know, we burn away warts and things like that, and like, but like that might have been just like, this is how it's done in Transylvania, and that's where Elizabeth was from, so that would be how she was raised with how to do these medical things.
Okay. So I could see this. I could see this.
But for the people in Hungary, they'd be like, oh my god, this is crazy. Why the hell would you do it this way?
Yeah, okay.
Like, you're torturing these girls, right?
Yeah, and I think she's doing it for the torture for the sake of torture when she's actually doing it to, like, help them potentially.
Yeah.
Allegedly. Theoretically.
Yes. Okay. And then as we'd already talked about, like, for, like, so, like, as to her, like, her maybe having blood or something on her, that may have been from her epilepsy, right? From like, because that was like a common form of treatment for her epilepsy. So
so
there are other reasons for some of these possible tortures that the other people may not have had the context for when they were doing their hearsay throughout the village.
Yeah, because, well, I mean, especially if you're just like, well, I heard she does this to her servants, and it's like, okay, but did you hear, like, why? Like,
exactly.
No, of course you didn't. So, like, okay, I can see how this could go down.
Yeah. As for the deaths that were put under Elizabeth's names, there were few deaths in her castle. But let's look at this realistically. Very few of the bodies were ever found.
Okay.
The ones that were found were victims of a plague that was literally running rampant through the entire village at the time.
Okay, so that's not exactly something that's in her control.
What would you prefer to believe, though? When our friend Thurzo dug up one of these young girls, she had been buried for some time already and was in a state of decomposition. So what did our friend Thurzo decide to do? He thought that the best form of action was to string up the body, partially decomposing, which of course looks like it's being tortured, and force Elizabeth to stand there next to it for the townsfolk to come and see, as he declared it to be one of her tortured victims, and called out all of her accusations, asking the townsfolk to now decide if she thought she was guilty or not.
It's a decomposed body. It's not gonna look like it's in the best shape of its life. Like, it's like...
No, but he used it to make it look like she had tortured it with, like, and use these people who don't know what the decomposed body would be.
That's so messed up.
So, like, how do you think that would make Elizabeth look to people who already had their minds played with and are having their minds played with again?
Good grief. Oh, that's so messed up.
Yeah.
Like, wow.
Yeah.
That's just vile. Like, on his part, that's just evil.
Absolutely. Here's another nail in his coffin.
Mm-hmm.
Elizabeth Bathory never had a trial.
You have got to be kidding me. All that power and she didn't even get a trial?
She never got a trial. The entire case against her was built on public hearsay and whatever Thurzo could make up from what he found evidence-wise.
And they just never, like, all that power, she doesn't even get a trial?
She never got a trial. Her servants all confessed under extreme torture and were executed as king's witnesses.
Okay. No, okay, so let me get it straight. She's doing things that are known to be like medical procedures in Transylvania, and like questionable, maybe, right? Like, I hear that. Like, but like, everyone's roasting her for these medical procedures, making it out like it's torture. Oh no, she's this great villain. Oh no, she's like out here torturing people. But then they're gonna turn around and torture her servants.
Yes.
Until they say what they want them to hear. Or
yeah.
Like, say what they want them to say. Like, that's... The hypocrisy is ripe.
Oh yeah. So, quick little fair dues. I'm going to I'm not getting too graphic, but... So,
I mean, if you've been able to handle it this far, are you saying that it's going to get worse than what you've already described?
Slightly.
Okay, so if you've already been squeamish, this is your warning to step aside.
Okay, so...
We'll see you later.
Two of her female servants had their fingers pulled off by red-hot tongs, then were burned alive.
Whoa! By the people who were, like, trying to investigate?
So, yeah, so that was their execution as king's witnesses. That was how they were murdered. Yeah, that was their execution.
That's so messed up. That is so much worse. That is so much worse than the needles under the fingernails. Like, that is absolutely so much worse.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. A young male servant was beheaded, considered to be a merciful execution due to his youth. His body was then...
the other stuff, yeah.
His body was then burned on the same pyre as the other two servants who were burned alive.
For being accomplices. Like, god damn. Like...
Another servant initially escaped being captured, but then caught and also burned alive.
Mm-hmm.
And then one servant was given a life sentence in jail because she was deemed to be an accomplice, but the quote-unquote evidence showed that she was abused by the other accomplices, so she was shown mercy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, take a good gulp of that tea.
I'm just...
Yeah.
Like, they're like, we were gonna send you to jail for life, but also you might be a victim, question mark?
No, they were going to...
We'll let you on.
No, if she wasn't shown to be abused by the other accomplices, she probably would have also had her fingers pulled off by the red-hot tongs and then burned alive.
Like, were the other accomplices still alive when they decided that, like, she had been abused by them? Or was that like well, they're dead anyway, so I may as well throw them under the bus to save my own skin kind of situation? Because, like, respect if that's the case, but, like, goddamn, like...
I don't know. It didn't say as to the... Probably around, like, the same... Like, it was probably all done at, like, the same time frame, right?
Yikes. Wow. Just wow.
So, Elizabeth Bathory, because of her family title, was deemed too important to be killed for her crimes.
So the servants that didn't do it all died in horrific ways.
Yeah.
But the one person that they're like, no, we're pretty sure she did it, she's the one that they're like, nah, we'll keep her alive.
Because her death would cause an extreme political upheaval. So basically, they're like, we need to save our own skins.
Like, straight up for politics. Like, not even trying to hide it.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Well, I think
like, it's just...
I think that deep down they all knew that she was really innocent, and that it's easier to murder, like, the lower class than the top of the upper class for crimes that they never really did.
That is so unbelievably
It's the 1600s.
I know, but it hurts.
It hurts. It really fucking hurts. But it's the 1600s, and they have the weirdest ideals.
Listen, we're not going to give this girl a trial. We're pretty sure she didn't actually do it, but we are going to convict her of it.
Because we want her land.
Because we want her land, but we can't kill her because that would cause too much of a public uproar. But so we're just going to brutally murder her servants instead.
Yeah. Well, because they had to, like, do something big to make it look like there was something actually being done about. Yeah.
Well, that's right, because at this point, the accusations are so wild that if they didn't do something, like, extreme, then they'd get public backlash anyway for not doing enough after this crazy, horrendous thing. Of like, but, like, that just makes me so sick that they know that she's innocent, but they're still going to brutally murder her servants who had nothing to do with this anyway. Like, that's just disgusting. Like,
yeah. So
I don't care by whose standards, that's disgusting.
Instead of killing Elizabeth, Thurzo locked her into her own castle.
Of course. Of course.
In a letter to the king, Thurzo said that she was locked into a bricked-in room where she'd never see sunlight again.
Yeah, I mean...
This has since been deemed to be highly unlikely, as letters from various priests who visited the castle have said that Elizabeth roamed her castle freely. So once again, it was probably a fake letter sent so that the public thought that it was being dealt with in a dramatic manner.
Oh my god.
To make it seem like it was a big thing when it's not.
When it very clearly wasn't. That's so, like...
Like, she was only under house arrest, not literally bricked into a room.
Well, because I was like, okay, so that sounds like isolation, which, like, you know, like putting someone in ISO, which we now deem as psychological, like, torture. Like, a lot of experts will call it, like, psychological torture to leave someone in isolation alone for more than 24 hours. Like, that's a long time to be absolutely alone with nothing but your thoughts. So I could understand back then if they had essentially put her in extended isolation and that was their, like, torture. But, like, to know that that wasn't even what was happening and it's still just them playing the political game. Yeah. And, like, actually, she's totally fine. She's getting off scot-free, which is, you know, I'm not saying that's a bad thing because clearly she's been, like, falsely accused of this stuff, but her servants weren't given that same mercy. And that's...
No, because they're lower class, so they didn't care about them.
I care deeply.
I care about them,
it
but
makes me mad. This is honestly
they did not.
So bad right now. I can't even lie.
So in 1610, Elizabeth had made sure that her will was up to date, leaving everything of hers to her children. In late August of 1614, she complained to her bodyguard that her hands were cold. He replied that it was nothing and suggested that she go lay down. The next morning, she was found dead in her bed.
Well, that escalated quickly. I feel like that's true for pretty much everything in this story so far, though.
Yeah. So her body was initially buried on the grounds of a church whose name I'm not even going to attempt, in November of the same year. But due to complaints by the villagers, she was apparently moved to the Bathory crypt in her hometown.
Okay.
However, the location of her body is now a mystery.
Of course it is.
It is believed to be buried deep under the castle in which she died, but there are no markings or any evidence of a gravesite.
So we just have no idea where she is now.
Yeah. Which honestly, I'm kind of happy that we don't really know where her body is, because there are like, the other day I was doing my ghost hunting course, and there's a grave site of a woman who over at the who's connected to, who was considered to be connected to the Conjuring House. She has
Oh yeah.
no connection to the Conjuring House whatsoever in
Oh.
actual history. But because of rumors about it, a lot of people now consider her to be a witch and connected to the Conjuring House, and her gravesite is constantly being desecrated by people who
Whoa.
and stuff. She was just a lowly farmer who lived near the house.
She was just a normal
She was
person.
just a normal person who now had, because of the whole Conjuring thing and that her name somehow got pulled into it,
Yeah.
people are constantly graffitiing and trying to tear down her gravestone and stuff like
Hmm.
that, where I'm like, I'm kind of glad that we don't know where Elizabeth is buried, because it saves her site from being destroyed by people who take us too far.
Yeah. No, that's
Then I'm
totally
like, at
fair.
least she can somewhat rest in peace.
Yeah, that's also true. I,
Because she
yeah,
may or
no,
may
that's a
not
really good
be
point.
guilty. Like, we
I
cannot
mean,
tell for
even as,
sure.
yeah, I mean, even as you were saying it, I was thinking about like, actually, you know what? That's fair. Like, powerful women in history, their gravesites have not been respected. Like, if you think of like even Marilyn Monroe,
Yeah.
it's there have been some gross things, some just gross things happen where it's like even after death, like they just can't get any kind of peace or respect. So like, no, I hear your point that like, yeah, no, it's probably better. It's probably better that way.
Yeah. So, as I said earlier, Elizabeth Bathory is everywhere in popular culture. So, she is most famous for being one of the possible inspirations for Dracula by Bram Stoker, which we've talked about before on the podcast. But there's also the Belgian erotic vampire thriller movie Les Livres Rouges, the Swiss metal band called Bathory, who were active from 1983 to 2004, Stay Alive, which is a horror film from 2006, and Blood Countess, which is an amazing novel by Lana Popvik in her mini serial killer series, which also includes one about a famous poisoner who I think I've talked about on this show.
Oh,
House
nice.
of Hunger by Alexis Henderson is also loosely based on Lady Bathory and highly recommended by me. I would say that Blood Countess is great if you're more of a YA fan, and House of Hunger is perfect if you lean more towards adult content.
All
Outside
right.
of popular culture, there were at least 7 women who have actually had trials and were convicted of crimes like Elizabeth was accused of against their servants.
Oh my God, so she wasn't even the only one.
Oh god, no. One of the ones that I know of, 2 were English and both also named Elizabeth.
Oh, irony. Okay.
One was Czech, one was from Chile, one Russian, one Greek, who is actually known as Mother Rasputin, which confused me because that made me think she was also Russian, since Rasputin immediately calls forth Russia in everyone's brains thanks to
Yeah.
Anastasia and the Romanov family. Mother Rasputin, though, got her name from the contemporary media, probably because of the Russian Rasputin, since she
That
was
makes
a
sense.
nun who would encourage wealthy women to join the convent and then tortured them until they signed all of their wealth to the monastery, in which she would then embezzle it from it and then usually kill the donor.
Whoa. And that's like confirmed, or is this another
Confirmed.
legend? Confirmed?
Confirmed. Of the deaths that she was tried for, some were donors and others were sisters that she had brutally murdered under the name of penance.
Whoa.
Another of these similar killers is from Madagascar, and then the last one is one absolutely famous serial killer from New Orleans, Miss Delphine Lalaurie.
Okay.
So, what do you guys all think? Is Elizabeth Bathory the bloodthirsty serial killer, or are you thinking like I am that she was most likely framed in order to remove her from the power that she held?
I mean, I feel like framed is a lot more reasonable like conclusion to come to. Like it's there's still some pretty dramatic allegations, you know? Like I'm not saying stuff like that doesn't happen. Stuff like that totally like crazy things definitely happen, but just like, I don't know, just given all of the everything, it seems more likely in this situation that she was framed.
Yeah, like I also am like as much as I also was like at first like, oh my god, like she's a total serial killer, and then I was like, and then I found out about some of like these other things. I'm like, oh wait,
Oh
oh yeah,
wait, oh wait.
no, we have a villain.
This
It's
is
not Bathory.
yeah. It's like there is a bad guy here. There is someone who's murdering innocent people, but it's not who we thought it was.
Like, oh shit, no. Like
Oh,
she very
yikes.
well could be innocent.
Yeah, and that's kind of the unfortunate thing now is that like she never stood trial. So like there's some things that we're just never gonna know.
Well, and I found it interesting that a lot of sources now, like, I remember, like, looking her up and stuff years ago, and everything was,
Mm,
like, very much of, this is what she did, this is who she is. And
yeah.
now when I looked things up, a lot of these same sources now have it more of allegedly and
Yeah.
possibly, and I'm like, okay, now all the sources are even changing
Their language a
their
little bit.
language
Yeah.
and definitely going more towards what the historians have been finding and stuff, right? Where I'm like, okay, good to know that it's not just like it's actually starting to trickle into like general
Yeah.
sources, like not just the historic, like the academic papers and
Yeah.
everything, but like the actual sources that the lay person would be looking at.
Yeah.
Because like
Yeah. You
even
don't have to dig
Wikipedia
quite so deep.
was using alleged and stuff like that instead of just the plain she is a serial killer. It's now that she's
Yeah.
the alleged. And I'm like, I'm so happy that this is starting to change.
Yeah. Oh man.
But not as
That's
brain breaking
wild.
as last week at least.
No, definitely not as breaking.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I do appreciate that. Way more straightforward this time.
All right. So yeah, that's your piece of history for today. Don't forget to check out greenleafgeek.com/WDYKA podcast for all of your dice and nerdy tabletop needs. We get you 10% off, so make sure to use that link or use our code at checkout.
We all love a deal. Take advantage of it.
Exactly. So yeah, we will see you guys all next time for another dose of weird history.
All right, see you guys later. Bye.